Hi, and welcome to Rewrite Your Money Story series. This is Terry Bach, your host. And I have noticed, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of the things that I notice is how busy a lot of us are. We're really busy, we're frantic, we're not getting things done, and we don't have a lot of free time. And yet when I talk to a lot of people, I find out that they're really not having the financial results that they want. So they're doing all this work and yet they're not having the results they want. They're not having the time freedom that they thought they might have, and they just aren't earning enough money. So I have put together a series of extraordinary experts who work with entrepreneurs on different things like mindset and limiting beliefs, systems, and leveraging. So that we can look at this issue from a lot of different perspectives. So I have invited Katherine Keller here today to the event because she started her own business as a single mom of two young kids. And so for any of you moms out there who think you can't do this, I want you to really pay attention to how Katherine did it. She's going to talk a little bit about her journey. So aside from her having to learn how to manage a business that actually makes money, she had to overcome the huge obstacle of her own fear and anxiety, which she realized was a common theme for females wanting to start their own business. So Katherine now works one-on-one with people who desire to become successful entrepreneurs. And she removes the stress by managing and building and organizing a step-by-step process to help them create the business that they deserve. So welcome, Katherine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. Before we get started, or as we get started, I'd really like to invite you to talk about your journey a bit from, overcoming your obstacles to getting to be a very successful businesswoman.
Perfect. I feel like one of the biggest attributes that I have in helping other entrepreneurs comes from being at the absolute rock bottom, lowest point I could possibly imagine in my life. I started my business in the dark pit of despair, recently divorced. And I had been a stay-at-home mom up until that point. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had a lot of emotional things that were going on inside of me, trying to figure out who I was through this process, not only as a human being and now an ex-wife, but also as a business entrepreneur. Could I do it? Is this what was best for me and my kids moving forward? So there was just a lot of noise going on. Again, not just on the business aspect, but the personal aspect as well.
Sure.
And so that is where I started. It's not the ideal place to start a business, but you can only go up from where I was at. Because
Right.
I was at the lowest of lows, where it was just a struggle to get out of bed sometimes, let alone pick up the phone and make a sales call.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where I began. And through that journey of trying to figure out who I was, I think it's a never-ending journey, to be honest, for all of us. I somehow was able to sort of, it was sort of a lifeline for me, my business, in many instances, in the sense that when I would get those little glimmers of hope, or that one sale that I really wanted to get, it would just keep me going for the next one. I tell people, Tony Robbins always talks about Cortez, and when he landed on the island to go to war, he made his soldiers burn the boats. There was no option of retreating. They burned the boats when they got to the island. They were going to fight this to the death. And for me, that was never an option to go back to work, because I just couldn't afford to work as a single mom with two kids having to go to daycare. It wasn't an option. I had no option but to make this work. And I think when you're in that position, you do what you have to. You find a way. There is no excuses. And that is, fortunately and unfortunately, where all of this began.
Okay. Okay. So I know that you had some obstacles. You talked about the fear and anxiety, first of all, which makes sense going, given all the things that you were going through at that time.
Right,
too.
right.
Yes.
And the fears came from a place of wanting to pretend like I had it all together.
Yes.
This not wanting people to worry, not wanting people to think I had made a mistake.
Right.
And I had this deep level of wanting to present this person to the world that wasn't exactly what I was feeling on the inside.
Exactly.
And so that's where the fear stemmed from,
Okay.
mostly for me.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of your work involves talking about perfectionism.
Yes.
And
Because that was such a sore spot for me at that time. Because I'm an oldest child.
Okay.
And so we tend to put a lot more, not always, but in my family, there was a lot of pressure, I think, on the oldest child, from starting in kindergarten to writing your letters perfectly, coloring inside the lines. We tend to have a lot more time with our firstborns to give them that attention with the others.
Right.
And so I remember perfectionism all throughout my youth. But then when I got into business, that perfectionism was more of a hindrance than it was an asset for me.
So what is perfectionism?
Perfectionism, and I want to make it very clear, because a lot of people think of a perfectionist in their brain, and they think of that man or that woman who kind of has it all together. They've got the manicure, their hair is done, their house is perfect, the laundry's put away, and that's sort of the stereotypical perfectionist that we have in our brains. But what I have found is, in reality, a perfectionist may have their little niches where they feel like this has to be perfect before I can present it to the world. Their house may be a mess. Their car may be full of sports gear and it may be dirty, but maybe when it comes to their business, they tend to not want to put something out there, not want to make that phone call, not want to send that email until they are sure it is done exactly perfect. And what it boils down to is perfectionism is just fear. It's fear of being judged. It's fear of disappointing somebody. And so we can have certain areas where we feel confident, and then we can have other areas where that sort of perfectionism mentality kicks in.
Right. And it sounds like your perfectionism started very young.
It did.
Which I think it usually does.
Yeah. Well, and my perfectionism when I was young was in all areas of my life. It was not just my grades. It was not just how I dressed. It was not just what I said or didn't say. I can remember it as young as elementary school. Everything in my room had to be perfect. Some would call that OCD. But for me, it was control.
It is control. Yeah.
And
you need to feel in control.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I knew doing certain things would please my parents. I don't want to make my parents sound like terrible people. They were wonderful people.
Absolutely.
But as children, we want to make them happy.
Right.
And so that happiness was in my control if I did exactly the way I was supposed to do everything.
And often it's coming from you, not them.
Yeah,
so they
absolutely.
wouldn't necessarily expect things to be a certain way.
I would say it snowballs a little bit. There's I can see over the years from my childhood how it may have just started with making sure my room was clean, but then it branched out to how I was with my friends as I got into high school, and then in college, what college I got into. And,
Right. Yeah.
I have shared that I was doing just fine in my own right, because I had this perfectionism under control.
Right.
Sociologists call it impression management a lot of times,
Okay.
because we're managing how people view us.
Right.
That is what it boils down to. And when we become entrepreneurs, that impression management is basically our PR, the PR department. Companies hire these big PR departments to manage how people view the business. Where when you're a solopreneur or a work from home entrepreneur, you don't have this big PR department, but sociologists call it impression management. We are very guarded about what we put out there, how people view us. We are conscious that what we wear makes an impression. We're conscious of how our branding on our website makes an impression.
So,
go ahead.
Katherine, specifically, how did the perfectionism really hold you back in your business in particular?
Right. So when I was in my 20s and teens and all the way up, I had it under control. I had that perfectionism. It was down. But then once the divorce happened, I could no longer wear that mask anymore.
Yeah.
And then I started a business, and I really tried to keep that perfectionism going. Tried to keep, as I said earlier, that persona that I wanted people to believe.
Sure.
And what would happen is I would analyze over and over, is this the right website for me? Is this the right color scheme that represents me? I wouldn't hit publish on that website for months and months and months and months and months. I wouldn't put out that training material for months and months. And I've noticed that a lot of, I mostly work with women, so I don't want to exclude the men when I say this, but I noticed that women, they would put together their free offer in order to get an email that would take them 6 months or a year to put together before they ever put it out there. And it's sort of this, oh, I need to do this, or, oh, I need to do that. And they would make these excuses why it couldn't go out. But really what it was a fear of, what if this doesn't work? What if I'm judged? What if people don't like it? Then I have to accept and swallow that horrible pill that people don't like what I've put out there.
And they often take it personally too, like if that isn't good, then it must be that I'm not good.
But what I talk about with my clients is, if it takes us 6 months to put out this offer, what could have happened is somebody else may have put theirs out in 2 weeks. Right. And in 2 weeks, we would have gotten that feedback that this needs to be tweaked a little bit, or this was or wasn't going to work. Yes. And then another 2 weeks, we could have put out something maybe completely different, or just tweaked it a little bit to make it more appropriate. And if you went on with every 2 weeks just tweaking and refining as we went, how many times would we have changed and adapted over that 6-month period that it took person A to put out their one item? Sure. And after they've invested 6 months and it doesn't work, they become defeated because they've invested 6 months of time for it to not work out.
Exactly.
And so that's how it tends to hold us back in that regard.
It really does.
I don't ever want to advocate somebody just throwing something out there that's not professional or doesn't represent them well. There's a fine line, but you do have to just sometimes throw and see what sticks on the wall and tweak it as you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what are some of the steps that you see that people can take to overcome this mentality of perfectionism?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that it's fear. I think we tend to hide behind the mask of perfectionism. We tend to hide behind the mask of wanting it to be professional. Oh, that's not professional enough. Oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. And we hide behind what it really is just fear. We're afraid. And I think once you acknowledge that, that's the biggest step you can take towards overcoming it.
Okay.
Because again, like I said, you've got to remember that other people are out there running the same race with you. And if you're just in the warm-up block
Right.
for 6 months or a year, while other people have already taken off, they've started running, if you
Mm-hmm.
keep that sort of mentality in mind, it tends to help you overcome.
So when you're working with someone and you know that they're really struggling with perfectionism, how
Mm-hmm.
do you actually, I mean, I understand you help them get to the place where they're realizing it's about fear.
Right.
And then what do you do with it?
Deadlines.
Okay.
Deadlines are a big accountability, I think, is one of the things that a lot of us miss. If we work from home, if we work by ourselves, we're solopreneurs, we don't have that accountability as
True.
if we were in an office. We have a boss looking over our shoulder. And so get a coach, get
Mm-hmm.
a friend, get somebody who will hold you accountable. If we set a 2-week deadline, you've got 2 weeks. You can
Right.
make it happen. We also tend to, because I work with a lot of women who do work from home and things come up, kids, softball games, whatever. And
Sure.
so we tend to lower the priority of getting things done. So I think you really need to evaluate how important is your business to you on this priority level. Because
Mm-hmm.
my kids are important to me and I want to be at all of their events as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
But, I also have to hold myself accountable to putting food on the table for them.
Exactly. And working from
That's
home can be very distracting if you let it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The third thing I would say that I've noticed with a lot of my clients that we tend to have heart to heart, really difficult conversations about is a lot of times they are not the breadwinner of their
Mm-hmm.
household. They have a partner who is the main source of income.
Sure.
And when you have that, not always, but a lot of times when you have that plan B, we talked earlier about burning the boats.
Right.
I didn't have, I was it.
Backup.
If I
Yeah.
wasn't working, we didn't pay the electric bill. And so a lot of times there's this subconscious, even though they want all of these things that they say they want to be debt free, they want to be able to take their families on vacation, there
Right.
is a safety net
There
underneath
is.
there.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about how much do you really want this, because you're still kind of holding on to that safety net that's underneath all of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think those are probably the biggest obstacles that most of the women I've worked with have had to overcome. And I think, again, acknowledging all of those three things with them is a
Exactly.
huge first step.
Right. So can you summarize the three things that you just mentioned?
Yeah,
Yeah.
summarizing it. Okay, so the first step we do is acknowledging that it's fear.
Okay.
Perfectionism stems from some sort of fear of being judged or
Mm-hmm.
disappointing somebody. Um, and the second step that we talk about is prioritizing accountability, making sure that they have somebody that's going to hold them accountable to getting done what they said that they would do. And the third step is that safety net. Do you have a safety net in place that you're subconsciously sort of relying on? If you had to provide for the groceries and the bill all on your own, what
Right.
would you do today? Tony Robbins talks about we should do this, we should do that, but really when it becomes a must is when it
Yes.
gets done.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I know that you have an awesome free gift for
Yes,
our
yes,
listeners. Can you
yes.
tell us about that?
So my background is in marketing, and I help a lot of women not only with their mindset, but with their marketing. I actually started in marketing, and what I realized was women, if they didn't get their mindset on correctly, it
Right.
doesn't matter if you have the best marketing plan in the world. We need to get the mindset right first. So that's why
Yes.
I think that both of them work together in that regard. And so what I do every season is I put together a done-for-you marketing plan. It's
Oh,
basically social media captions for the fall months. It's the best hashtags to use right now, what to post, when to post, sales, copywriting. It's a $100 value is what I usually
wonderful.
sell it for. So it's
Okay.
a free gift today. And
Thank
this is
you.
for the autumn season, getting
Okay.
ourselves ready for the holiday
Oh,
seasons.
that sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Yes,
And for
yes,
the listeners, there is a button below the video where you can just click on the button and receive Catherine's very generous gift.
yes. It's
So,
one of my favorite things. It's one of my clients' favorite things as well, just because they can copy and paste a lot of it,
right.
have it done for them.
That's wonderful. Well,
Yes.
thank you, Catherine.
Thank
And
you.
yes, and thank you to our listeners too for being on the Rewrite Your Money Story series. And tune in tomorrow for another expert who will be sharing her way of helping you work less and earn more. Thank you.
Thank you.